Well, good afternoon and welcome. We all really appreciate that you being here with us this afternoon, and we hope that the information that is shared today will help support your work as the professional development coordinator for your district. I'm Chris Jarbo, and I work in the Office of Teaching and Learning at KDE. I have several other team members that'll be joining me today to provide information for you. We have district staff to talk about funding, about resources, and then also some other PDCs that are going to share some of the strategies they use within their district. Before we begin, I do want to give you just a little Teams 101 for those of you that are not familiar with this platform. It's very similar to Zoom or Google Meet. One of the main things I think helps with Teams is having your screen maximized. For whatever reason, even if it's filling your screen and you're not maximized, some of the features can't be seen. The icons and the tools are at the top. Your cameras and mics are disabled for now, but when we get into breakout rooms and have some discussion later, you'll have access to those. But we do hope you will make use of the chat feature. Some of you already have, and now may be a good time to experiment with that. But we want you to feel free throughout the afternoon to put questions or comments in there. We do have time built in for questions, and we want to do our best to answer those on the spot. But if there are questions that may be more lengthy or detailed to answer, we are going to make sure to make note of that, and we will get back with you on that. We're also going to provide our contact information in multiple places, so you'll have access to that, and we want to make sure that we can help you in any way that we can. So we do have a lot of information to share today. You may want to grab a pen and paper just to jot down a few notes, but we are recording the meeting, or not necessarily a meeting, but the information, so you can have that to look back on in your own time frame. Also, as sometimes happens with live events, there are technical difficulties and whatnot. So you will have access to look back at things at your own pace and your own convenience. Also want to let you know that we do not have a dedicated break built in today. So if you need to get up from your workstation for any reason, you'll have access to all this again to come back and pick up on anything that you may have missed. So here's our agenda, and hopefully this reflects our primary goal of supporting your work. And we've kind of put that under the scope of intentionality and put that into three different directions, if you will. We want to provide information on how different federal grants can support professional learning in your district. We want to provide some information regarding resources and tools that are available from the Department of Education. And then finally, we want to give you an opportunity to hear from your peers on ways they have structured professional development within their districts. And we tried to get a good range of districts in terms of size. We have a large district and what we would consider kind of a medium-sized district, and then a smaller district represented today. So to summarize our goals, I hope I'm clicking. I got a lot of things clicking right here. And Christine, I saw your message, and I'll take care of that in just a second. We really want to provide information that's going to strengthen your knowledge regarding how federal funding can support professional learning. We want to show you some specific tools and resources that are currently available from KDE. We also want to put some names and faces together for you, so you'll have that information in case there's a specific area that you want to learn more about or need additional support. And then again, we want to give you an opportunity to hear from some people that share your role and how they have planned and implemented and evaluated professional learning in their districts. At the end of the day, we hope that you are going to be able to strengthen the overall intentionality in which professional learning is, again, planned, implemented, and evaluated at your district. I do want to mention one thing before we get started. You are going to hear a lot of us use the terms professional development, professional learning, PD, PL. And for today's purposes, we're going to, they're all going to mean the same thing. Professional learning is really more reflective, I think, of what we do now, and that is learning continues. So we continue to learn and continue to grow. But professional development is the language that's in federal and state statute, and I think it's language we're comfortable with and we're used to hearing. But again, it's more reflective of the growth that's involved with learning. So that you'll hear them all, but we are really talking about the same thing. So I do want to introduce some team members from our Federal Programs Office. We have Erin Suddeth and Layla Brewer joining us from the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, and we have Kathy Collins from the Office of Teaching and Learning. And within each section, we have put together a few guiding questions just to kind of focus your thinking on what you're getting ready to hear. And these are the guiding questions for this section. So hopefully you're going to be able to answer these questions at the end of this in terms of what types of federal funding are available, what you should take in consideration, and then how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your program. So Erin, I'll let you all get started and just be here when you need me.
All right, thanks. My name is Erin Suddeth, and I'm the branch manager for the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch. I'm also familiar with Title III and Title V, so I'm going to be sharing information about those today as well, but I'm not the main contact. All right, professional learning under Title I Part A. So districts can use Title I Part A funds to provide professional development that meets the definition of professional development found in Section 810142 of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. These professional development expenses have to be based on identified needs of the district or the school. As is the case with all purchases made with federal funds, the needs have to be reasonable, which means a prudent person would consider the amount being spent to be within reason. Allocable, meaning it can be supported by that grant, it ties to the purpose of the grant. Necessary, meaning the grants program could not function without this purchase. And finally, documented, and that just refers back to being an identified need in a needs assessment or a CSIP or a CDIP, something like that. Professional learning under Title I can include teachers, principals, other school leaders, paraeducators, parents and families, as well as applicable non-public school staff. And there's a number of things you could use your Title I Part A funds for when it comes to professional development. Registration fees, travel, so hotel, meals, mileage, that kind of thing. Any materials that might be needed for the training. Substitutes for teachers who are going to be out of the classroom because they're attending a training. You could perhaps bring in some outside consultants to provide some PD, book studies, as well as stipends either for participants or potentially for someone at the district who's going to provide some training to all of the staff.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Collins and I work with Title II Part A And just to go over some of the ways you can use Title II Part A funds for professional learning, they are to provide high quality supplemental personalized professional learning for teachers, instructional leadership teams, principals, or other school leaders who are requesting training. And this professional learning should focus on improving teaching and student learning. It's not to be spent on students, but it is to be spent on teachers to improve their teaching technique or any leadership in the district. There are a couple of really good resources that you can use. One is your Title II Part A coordinator in your district. And on our website, we have a Title II Part A handbook that lists all the information. And I encourage you to reach out to the person and to this handbook to help you in knowing how you can use the funds effectively and correctly. But professional learning funded through Title II Part A must meet an identified need of the district or school. It's not to be used just for anything that people might want to attend, but it must meet the identified need. And the professional learning must be evidence-based to the extent that the SEA can determine that evidence is reasonably available. And one thing that is really, really important to remember is that the funds used for Title II Part A on professional learning must be for professional learning that is above and beyond the 24 hours that is required by the district. And just some ways that you can use Title II Part A is for the registration fees, to pay for consultants, for book studies, materials, substitutes for the teachers that attend a Title II funded professional learning event, and travel to a Title II funded professional learning event.
All right. As I said, I'm not the main contact for Title III. The contacts are Neil Watts and Aaron Graves, and we do have their contact information for you guys at the end of our section here. So for professional learning under Title III, ESSA 3115C actually requires all districts receiving Title III Part A funds use at least a portion of those funds to provide effective professional development. And there's some requirements as to what that professional development should look like in the law. It needs to be designed to improve the instruction and assessment of English learners. Also needs to be designed to enhance the ability of teachers, principals, and other school leaders to understand and implement curricula, assessment practices and measures, as well as instructional strategies for English learners. It needs to be effective in increasing children's English language proficiency or substantially increasing subject matter knowledge, and teaching skills of teachers. And it needs to be of sufficient intensity and duration to have a positive and lasting impact on the teacher's performance in the classroom. So we don't want to see like a, sit and get one and done and then we never think about it again. I've also got some information that's not on the slide. In terms of who can receive this professional development, classroom teachers, and that's both your designated EL teacher as well as just a general classroom teacher who's working with English learner students, principals and other school leaders, administrators, as well as other school or community-based organizational personnel. And the types of activities or expenses that could be supported. You could have a professional development consultant, any sort of materials that participants will need, registration fees, travel expenses, substitute expenses, and then within the application, there's also a line that just says other. So there might be something that's not in that list, but definitely reach out to one of the Title III consultants to make sure that the other expense you have would be allowable under Title III. And I see a question that relates to Title I in the chat. If you consolidate your Title I, Title II, and Title IV, once you move funds into Title I, they take on the properties of Title I funds. Those are Title I funds now, so they would be subject to the Title I requirements.
Okay, so next is Title IV Part A. I'm Layla Brewer. I'm Title IV Part A Program Consultant. So first of all, to determine whether or not you could utilize funds for Title IV Part A, first of all, if your district receives at least $30,000 or more in funding, it has to be based upon a comprehensive needs assessment for your district. Second, as has been mentioned before, any charges must be reasonable, necessary, allocable, allowable, and documented, as well as supplemental. And I'll cover what supplemental means in a later slide. Next, it also would include any district or school staff, and also in any non-public private school educators that have chosen to participate in Title IV Part A as part of the equitable services. Funds may be used for registration fees, travel, materials, outside consultants, book study substitutes, or stipends for participants, or for district staff providing training. So it's very similar to a lot of the other federal programs as far as what the requirements are for Title IV. In Title IV Part A, there are 3 content areas. First of all, it is to ensure students access to and success in well-rounded educational opportunities. And this is really like your academic content areas as well as your special areas if you're thinking about like music, art, physical education, career and technical education. So it's fairly broad as far as what that definition is in well-rounded educational opportunities. The second is to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students. So this is looking at the physical health as well as the mental health of students. Staff that you may want to consider including in this area as far as providing professional development and training would be also looking at your counselors, your school resource officers, possibly additional support staff like your bus drivers, your classified staff, anyone who may be able to see any sort of signs that may be noted for students as far as like looking into their physical and mental health concerns. The third area is the effective use of technology, and this section of the grant really was mostly designed around professional learning and professional development, and this is to maximize and enhance the use of educational technology. So it's looking at seeing how can you really provide additional ongoing supportive training to your educators on utilizing those devices, utilizing those technology programs, and how to get the most use out of them, especially considering the high cost they are for the district, making sure you're getting the most out of those items through some sort of professional development or professional learning.
Okay, professional learning under Title V Part B, which is the Rural Education Achievement Program, and specifically the subgrant that we handle is the Rural Low-Income Schools Grant, or RLIS. And this one is kind of easy because districts can use their RLIS funds to pay for activities that are authorized under Title I Part A, including parent and family engagement, Title II Part A, Title III Part A, and Title IV Part A. So any of the professional learning activities that are allowable under those programs could be supported with these Title V Part B funds. All of the requirements to those different programs would still apply, so it would still need to be tied to a need. If there was something that wasn't allowable, say you wanted to do parent and family engagement, but you wanted to pay for a meal, that's not allowable with any federal funds, so you couldn't support that with Title V funds. Oh, and our Title V consultant is Shoshana Williams.
So where do you begin in deciding what to spend your federal dollars on? The first thing you would want to do is to look at your professional development needs that have been determined by your stakeholders and in the district. And then you would like to see how you can meet those identified needs with professional development. You may decide that there's some conferences that you want some of the people in the district to attend. There might be some in-district training that you want to provide. You might want to hire a consultant to come in and to address an issue. Or there may be some book studies that you think that would be good for schools or the whole district to have, or a group of people within the district to participate in. And one thing that you'll want to do is, because we want to be very good stewards of our federal dollars in providing these needs, is you want to determine some kind of method of evaluating the effectiveness of the professional development. You want to be sure that what you send these people to, that they do come back and try to implement them in the district. We've just come off or winding down from our consolidated monitoring season, and we have found in the districts who have done well or who are doing well did start out with a process where they identified their needs by looking at their CDIPs, their CSIPs, maybe their data, looking at some surveys that they've taken to see what are the areas they want to address in their district. And while we were out this year, we went to a district where they had a really good process for letting their schools request professional development funds. And you'll see this is not a required form. It's not a regulated form. It is just a tool in the toolbox that you might be interested in using. And you'll see it over there to the side. It just has you identify the need in the district and how this professional development is going to be helping and addressing that need. And then it goes through the process of telling you how, or identifying how you will see or witness that they are using the knowledge that they learn at this professional learning event in the classroom. We plan to have this document ready in our Title II Part A handbook in the spring. It's not ready for dissemination right now, but you can just look at it and kind of get some ideas of what you might want to ask the people in your district that are requesting or when they are going to be attending this professional development.
Okay, so next it is looking at identifying the appropriate federal funding source and also identifying whether or not federal funds should be utilized for the professional learning or professional development that you're looking at implementing within your district. The first thing to consider is supplement, not supplant. Most federal programs, except for Title I, has a general supplement, not supplant requirement, which basically states that funds cannot be used for anything that is required by state or local law. So any of those required professional learning or professional developments cannot be paid for with federal funds, or anything that was previously paid for by state or local funding sources. And Erin's going to jump in and talk about the Title I supplement, not supplant.
So at the school level, when we think about supplement, not supplant, what we're looking for with Title I is typically a supplement, not supplant methodology. And that methodology needs to show that your general state and local funds are being allocated in a Title I neutral manner. So every school is receiving the amount of state and local funds that they would have received regardless of their participation in Title I. That's kind of the big focus for us at the school level.
Thanks, Erin. Next thing to consider, which Erin had covered previously, is the reasonable necessary. So again, reasonable is not excessive in cost and based upon prudent and sound purchasing practices. Necessary is that it is essential for carrying out the needs-based federal program. Allocable and allowable is the cost is incurred specifically for the benefit of the program. It's distributed proportionately. It's an allowable activity and meets the program's intent. Documented is that the district has documentation showing it is a need through the needs assessment process and through stakeholder consultation. And they're also able to provide documentation that the activity is indeed supplemental. So next is professional development and learning that's paid with federal funds must also meet the definition of ESCA section 810142. which that basically in part states that funds must be used to support professional learning activities that are sustained, intensive, collaborative, job-embedded, data-driven, and classroom-focused, and they are not standalone one-day or short-term workshops. The purpose is to ensure that you are doing that long-term type of planning to ensure that the professional development and professional learning is beneficial. And as Kathy had mentioned previously, funds cannot be used for required district trainings, and they also must be above and beyond the 24 hours of the required district trainings. So you want to think through that as well. And when it comes to meeting the intent of the program, I know Erin said with Title III, there are certain EL requirements of how those funds may be used. So it's really looking at what funding source, federal funding source, best meets what you're looking for professional learning. Or Title IV, there's some school safety and mental health types of things that could be done with those funding where it might be more appropriate. So really looking across all of your federal programs and your district needs to kind of determine how best to fund those activities.
All right, we've each kind of alluded to this a bit, monitoring for effectiveness. So your professional development does not end just because the conference or the session has ended. It's really important to monitor for that implementation and effectiveness. And as Kathy had mentioned, that should be part of your planning process on the front end, is how are we going to monitor this? So a couple things for you to think about. How will you ensure strategies learned in professional development are implemented? Are you going to do classroom walkthroughs to see that teachers are implementing these strategies? How are you going to verify that the knowledge is gained, that the knowledge gained during the professional development is shared with other staff? Are you going to have the person who attends the training present at a staff or a PLC meeting to kind of train everyone else? And how are you going to determine if the professional development was effective? You might look at participant feedback, like exit slips and survey results after the training. And of course, you'll also want to review your data to see if there was a positive impact after the new strategies were implemented. And lastly, we just have some reflection thoughts and questions for you. So based on your learning about federal program funding for professional learning, think about what the most important aspect is that you need to remember. Consider what resources you'd like to further explore, as well as what might be some possible next steps for using what you've learned here to help strengthen your district's professional learning plan.
Thank you all so much. We are going to just pause here to give you some time to reflect on that, and then to ask any questions. Please put those in the chat if you have any questions for our team, and then just like I said, we'll just pause here for a minute, and if not, we'll move on. All right, I think it does not look like there are any questions. Again, here's the contact information for all federal programs consultants. I will have this at the end as well. Thank you all again for that information, and please, those of you that are participating, do not hesitate a bit to reach out to any of these people or myself. So next we want to look, change our focus to some resources that are available through the Department of Education. We are joined by Renee Yates, Chris Patton, Jan Sellers, Misty Higgins, and Fox DeMoisey, who all work in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And as we did before, we've got us just a few questions that maybe to kind of guide your thinking, and as you're listening, kind of be thinking about these things, and they are what are on the screen. So first, we want to talk a little bit about the professional development diagnostic that is uploaded by the districts each year. We are going to get some information about high quality instructional resources and where we are in that process. We're going to hear from our MTSS consultant on available resources from or that support that program. And then lastly, we're going to hear from our professional development consultants on resources that are available through their work. So I think, Renee, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you turning over to me. Hi, I'm Renee Yates, and I work in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And I recognize many names in the participant list this afternoon, and I thank you all for joining us. And yes, I do think that this slide deck will be available after our presentation today, and Chris will get those out to you. That question's popped up a couple of times in the chat. So in my current role, I've spent the last few months reviewing district and school entries in the professional development diagnostic tool. And during this portion of the forum, I plan to share some information about the professional development diagnostic tool, how it's intended to be used, and then some proposed revisions that we are currently working on to make the diagnostic more intentional as you plan your district professional development, professional learning. So the reason that we developed the diagnostic is to support schools and districts as they design and implement professional development plans. And the plan should be, of course, based on a local needs assessment. And that was mentioned a little bit earlier in our presentation, is that there needs to be some way to identify what the needs of the district are. So as you can see here, we're supporting the Kentucky revised regulations about how professional development should be constructed in your districts. The reason for the diagnostic is then to support districts, and you can see the language there of the KAR. Go ahead, Chris. You can see the breakdown of the regulation, and the information collected from the diagnostic questions clearly support districts and schools as you design an effective plan. The KAR requires plans to have a clear connection to the school and district mission, a description of who will be participating in the professional learning, and a needs assessment analysis. There should also be professional development objectives that are focused and a process of evaluation. And this diagnostic asks for you to think about two key areas that you're going to focus on as both schools and then as a district as a whole. Go ahead, Chris. So, these are the questions that are the beginning of the diagnostic. It's asking for the district mission statement, and then the questions guide you to identify two critical areas for improvement. And the district and school diagnostics should align with the mission as well as with each other. Continue, Chris. Okay, this part of the diagnostic is really breaking down part 4. These are specific questions to consider that guide the planning process in the top 2 professional development priorities. This is the main part of the diagnostic to use with developing and planning the details of your school and district plans. You can see within the subsections of the diagnostic, they're asking for specific information such as objectives, intended results, success criteria, who the intended audience will be, specific resources that'll be needed, and then how the plan will be monitored for effective implementation. So during the recent review of the diagnostics that are currently been uploaded just this past December, the trend with successful districts is that their plans were clear, focused, and concise. Specific topics for PD were intentionally selected as the focus based on the needs assessment. Go ahead, Chris. So currently we are thinking about some revisions to the plan. So right now you will upload your information into eProve in late December for the current school year. So as you know, the school year then is half over. So since the purpose of the diagnostic is to support your planning and designing and implementing of your plans, we felt that that December deadline really is not getting to the planning portion since your school year is half over. So we're currently thinking of revising and moving the diagnostic to phase 4, and it would be due to be uploaded by May 1st. Districts and schools will then have data to their professional learning for the following school year and be able to use the questions to support that planning process that we really want you to think about. And then you would be able to look forward to the next school year as you start to think about, oh, what do we need to do now to make our programs more effective? When reviewing several of diagnostics in December, we found that many of the questions were answered in very generic terms. And what we want to happen is for you to really pinpoint what high quality professional development you're going to be instituting with your teachers throughout the summer in preparing for the following school year, and then that ongoing development through the next school year. So these changes, of course, will not take place until I guess 2022-23 school year. So just look for that to happen. Of course, that's just in the proposal right now. We're also thinking about changing some of the questioning, the language in the questions to be more intentional and specific. So you will hopefully see that change when you work on the diagnostic in May 1st of 2023. It's hard for me to say that this far in advance. So please let me know questions you have. You can answer the feedback form at the end of the forum. There's a place for your feedback, or you may just email me directly. Those of you that knew me in the past, I had a number 2 in my name. That number 2 is gone now. So if you have my email that pops up in your search, make sure it's the current one without the number 2. I'd be more than happy to answer questions or take your suggestions on how we can make that diagnostic more effective for you instead of just another thing to check off your list, because we really want it to be useful for you. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Renee, there's a lot of good feedback and comments in the chat. So I next would like to introduce Chris Patton, who's going to talk to you a little bit about high quality instructional resources.
Hi, everybody. I just want to introduce myself. Some of you may have known me in a former life as Chris Powell. I'm a retired teacher and principal, and I've come back out of retirement for a little while to oversee the HQIR project grant work that KDE is doing for the state. I guess the first thing I want to talk about before I get to the grant is the role of the district high quality instructional resource coordinator. We're asking all districts to identify one person for this role. In the past, you may have had a textbook coordinator, someone to lead the adoption and make those purchases, but we'd like you to think about this as something more evolved. It should extend well beyond purchasing and selecting. So the person will also lead the HQPL, the high quality professional learning process. But our hope is that districts and schools use this process to choose materials that are of true high quality based on research. And we want student outcomes improved and really thinking about teacher efficacy. We all know how many hours teachers spend creating resources, and hopefully they will be choosing better resources that requires them to spend less time developing their own. And the district leader should also be ensuring that the second bullet takes place. Too many times we adopt or purchase resources and we just hand them to the teacher. Here are your resources, go. And what we'd like to see is that when we adopt these resources or purchase them, that we implement them with fidelity, that we provide training time, collaboration for our teachers to make sure that they're implementing these resources with consistency and fidelity, whether that be across a grade level, a school, or even a district. So if you haven't already, check open house to make sure that this person's been named. It may be you, there's a good chance that it is, but if that person hasn't been named for your district, and I'd say we have about 75% of the districts that have named their person, but if you haven't, we'd ask you to go into your district superintendent, assistant superintendent, whoever the person may be that would decide that, select that person, make sure they're identified. And this will ensure that you get communications from KDE relating to HQIR, HQPL, all upcoming training information, resources that we have for you, and we don't want anybody left out of the loop. I think you can go on to slide 2. Yeah. So the pilot is really at this point is a 2-year process. And when we think about high quality instructional resources, we want you to think about that as just a part of designing your curriculum. It's just one step. We are focusing on that heavily, but all districts in the pilot are going through the entire curriculum development process. So we're currently middle of the first year. We have 12 districts participating, and we did have more than that apply, and we're very sorry we couldn't accommodate them all. But we do appreciate how much time they signed up for and the work that they're doing. All these districts do cover the 8 cooperatives, and so they will be participating for 2 years, and it involves extensive training and quite a bit of coaching, both at the district level and the school level. And that training, or excuse me, the coaching is provided by Achievement Network. And at this point, right now, they're working at the district level, but very soon they're going to start implementing school level coaching. Most of our districts have more than one school involved. They could have up to 3. It could be any grade level. They could have elementary, middle, and high. They could have chosen all elementary. We do have a couple districts that only have one school involved, so it was really their choice during the application process. So as part of that process, they're going to be using the Reading and Writing Consumer Guide, and that was developed by KDE, Ed Reports, and leading educators, all working together over many months. And what that guide should do is help you ensure that you're going through all the steps, all the processes to select a high quality instructional resource. So you want to make sure, it'll help you make sure that your resources are aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, that they're engaging for students, that you've involved all stakeholders in the selection process. It should help you streamline the process. The document is extremely usable, step by step, what you want to go through. It's gone through many drafts. It's been reviewed by reading and writing educators, the QCT, and right now it is actually going to be used tomorrow to train the districts involved in the cohort. So this will be our first actual training for our districts. It'll be finalized for everybody's use in July. After we let everybody use it and see if we need to make any changes, then we'll release it statewide. In June 15th, I believe, the co-ops will receive training on the consumer guide so that all districts will have access to that training. So I think in the future, you can look forward to your regional cooperatives delivering some training to you that you can bring your teachers to, leaders, or perhaps bring them into, you can go learn it, bring it back to your schools, however you want to do it. But you will have training around that consumer guide and how to use it. For the grant and pilot next steps, all of this work's been made possible by grant funds, and it involves several external partners. The first pilot phase right now continues through the summer of 23, and those districts involved are going to be completing their coaching, their curriculum development process. They're going to select their high quality instructional resources and purchase those. And then finally, they're going to implement those with coaching in their schools and districts. Then hopefully we can either do another round of reading and writing for more districts. We've had a lot of requests for, and our original plan was to move straight into math and replicate this process for that content area. But either way, we'll send you information, excuse me, through the HQR coordinator. And I'm sure Chris Jarbo would send you any updates that we can share with her. And so that's what's going on. I'll look ahead. And if you have any questions, just let me know, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Patton. There are a lot of Chris's and Crystals in our division, so that's sometimes we do have to use our last names too, especially Chris Patton has gotten a lot, and then they'll mention that, and I'm thinking, I don't know what you're talking about. So,
I know,
but I actually do know a little bit.
I can go by Christine. That might help.
So does anyone have any questions specific to Chris on the high quality instructional resources and the pilot involved with that? All right, thank you so much for providing that information. Next we have Jan Sellers, who is going to talk to us about the multi-tiered system of supports and the resources that are available for that.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Jan Sellers, the MTSS coordinator in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And so today, as we're learning about those professional learning resources we have available through KDE, we're really going to focus a little bit of time to talk about those that we have that will support implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. So the main resource that we have for you is our website, the KYMTSS.org, and I just dropped that in the chat. That really functions as our toolkit of all the resources available to support MTSS implementation. We launched that website about this time last year. So many of you may have already had a chance to get on there and look around, but I just wanted to take a little bit of time to orient you to what's on the site and how to access it, and then we'll dig a little deeper into some of the resources that are there for you. So really, it functions as a way to build a shared understanding around the language and around MTSS. So if you would do one little click for me, Chris. There are two places where you can access some information from the navigation pane, the Overview tab and the Why KYMTSS tab. You can also access information by scrolling just down through the home page as well. Then we have information around 6 essential elements that we have identified as critical for an effective implementation. And our resource library, a drop-down box of some resources that you can download, like our implementation guide, as well as being able to access the different resources around each essential element. So when you get on the these are screenshots of the overview page and the KYMSS page. And again, these are really designed to build that overview, that common understanding. And so this is a good starting place for most districts who are trying to gain an understanding about what we mean by MTSS in Kentucky. So on the overview page, you're going to find the definition of Kentucky's definition of an MTSS. You're going to find some information around the 6 essential elements and how they are represented in the KYMSS graphic. And there's a downloadable crosswalk, and that crosswalk is a look at other multi-tiered systems like academic RTI, PBIS, an integrated systems framework where mental health is integrated into those multi-tiered systems. And you see how all of those components fit under the overarching framework of Kentucky's multi-tiered system of support. So again, it's just a good resource to build that understanding. On the KYMSS page is going to go into the purpose, and we use an integrated framework where we're integrating the domains of academic, behavior, and social emotional. We look at what some of those benefits are, and then there's just a timeline that kind of will show districts and schools how we got here from those early days in the late 1990s where it all started with PBIS, moved to academic RTI, and then more recently in the literature and research, you're seeing it referred to as a multi-tiered system of support. So one of the things that we really want to build understanding around are the elements that Kentucky has identified as essential to the implementation and sustainability of the framework. So those 6 elements are depicted in the KYMSS graphic. And then on the home page, if you scroll down, you'll come to icons representing each one of those essential elements. And if you do a quick click for me, Chris. By clicking on the icon, you will be able to open up a page that gives you an overview of that particular element. And also on another click, you can access that same information from the essential elements drop-down box. And that's just where, again, you can find out a little bit more. What those pages look like, on the next slide, you'll see again, representing the drop-down box, it brings up a page, and all of these are designed consistently where you have an overview of what that element is, why it's considered essential to the framework, and then the key features of implementation around the systems, the data, and the practices that would need to be in place. And then each of those individual pages will link you to the resource page that supports that element. So this is a broad overview, again, developing that understanding of what needs to be in place for an effective system. When you go to the resource library, you again come to a drop-down box where you can access the Kentucky, the KYMSS Implementation Guide. That's a newly released resource we released this fall. That's a downloadable PDF. And then the other selections will take you to a page of resources designed to match that particular element of the framework. So I wanted to just bring your attention to the KYMSS Implementation Guide. This will take those implementation briefs from the website one step deeper, where you can actually go in and deepen your knowledge and learning about effective implementation. When you go into the guide, as you can see by the table of contents, there will be an introduction, just the whole purpose of the guide, and it's really a support to build understanding, to kind of supplement your professional learning around those particular topics. It talks about what we mean in Kentucky by an integrated framework. It looks at those essential, introduces those essential elements and talks about some infrastructure that needs to be in place. And then the majority of the document, the guidance document, is around those 6 essential elements, what we mean, why it's essential, and key implementation features that would need to be in place. Then the other resource we have for each essential element is that resource page. And each essential element has its own resource page. They're all designed consistently, where there will be some featured resources. These will typically be a foundational resource or tool, or maybe something that we've newly released. And then the other resources on the page are typically designed around the systems, the data, and the practices that might need to be in place for an effective implementation. So what I'd like to do is give you a few minutes to be able to explore the website and kind of get a sense for what is on there. So we're going to take about, I think we're doing pretty good on time. So I'm going to give you around 7 or 8 minutes just to actually get on the website. I'll put that back in the chat if you need to access it again. And then I want you to be able to think about, as you're exploring, focus on those resources that could best support your district and their next phase of an MTSS implementation. And also think about your next steps in bringing that information back to your district. I would ask that you might jot down some of your thinking, because when we come back, we'll go into some breakout rooms and give you an opportunity to discuss with some of the other coordinators. So take about the next 7 to 8 minutes to explore the site, and then we'll come back. All right. So I think what we'll do now, if everyone would come back, whole group. I know that's not a lot of time for a deep dive, but we would like for you to be able to have some opportunity in your breakout rooms to look a little, to have some discussion around the resources that you saw. So what we'd like you to do is, as you discuss those resources for MTSS implementation, just have some discussion around the resources that you selected that you thought might be best to support your district in their next phases of implementation, maybe some ways that you might be thinking about taking that information back to your district, just an open discussion. We're going to give you about 10 minutes in your breakout rooms, and then we will see you back here. Give Chris a minute to set us up and send us on. Anyway, I hope you have a chance, at least during your independent time, to kind of get a sense of what's on the site and how to navigate it. I will let you know that the KYMTSS Newsletter is how we will communicate, or one of the ways that we'll be communicating any newly released resources. It's also where we kind of just give you updated information around the research on MTSS. So if you have not already, go ahead and sign up for the newsletter. You can see the link at the top of the web page where you sign up for that. Always, if you have any questions or you just need a thought partner about how you might want to be using some of the resources or some next steps, please feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to talk further with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. And I certainly do apologize for any problems with technology. But again, we will be recording, and I will send this to everyone in our monthly communications, the link to it. So now I would like to introduce Misty Higgins and Fox DeMoisey. They are also in our office, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about standards implementation resources.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much, again, even with patience with kind of figuring out the platform here. But my name is Misty Higgins, and I'm joined by Fox DeMoisey, and we are professional learning coordinators in the Division of Program Standards in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And what we want to do now is to transition into professional learning resources that we have available to support standards implementation at the local level. And as you all hopefully know, KYStandards.org, it is your one-stop shop for everything standards related. But today we want to focus on our implementation guidance documents that really help to kind of organize and summarize many of the resources from our website in a very user-friendly way. And so the purpose of the standards implementation guides is to assist schools and districts with identifying resources available from the KDE to support different stages of standards implementation. You know, we recognize that schools and districts are all likely in various places in terms of where they are with implementing the standards. So these guides are really organized around those major areas or phases of implementation, and then the resources that we would have to support that particular area. And as you can see here on the slide, we have a general implementation guide, and then we have one for mathematics, reading and writing, science, and social studies. And we do update these regularly as new resources become available. So it's a good starting point for you when you're trying to see what we have. So we just want to quickly start with an overview of that general implementation guide. And this particular guide focuses on systems and structures that support standards implementation and really help to create that curricular coherence across the school or the district. And this guidance document, it aligns to the major curricular components that are outlined in the model curriculum framework, if you are familiar with that document. But within the general implementation guide, it will highlight professional learning resources that we have to support aligning your local curriculum and selecting your instructional resources in alignment to the Kentucky academic standards. Structuring your PLCs to really support collaboration as leaders and teachers work to implement your local curriculum aligned to the CAS. Creating a balanced system of assessment with a heavy emphasis on utilizing the formative assessment process at the classroom level, and then professional learning resources on utilizing evidence-based instructional practices as a part of ongoing classroom instruction to really help students reach those grade level expectations within the CAS. The general guide also includes resources that we have around accelerating student learning through the summer and the academic school year, as well as resources to support families in their understanding of the standards and assessment. So here is a screenshot from the first page of that general implementation guide, and all of them have kind of a similar format, but here you can see it's going to match to the major sections that were on that previous slide. So for example, in that first blue box, you will see that that heading is framed around the question of what resources are available to my school or district to support aligning our local curriculum and our instructional resources to the Kentucky academic standards. And so what you will see then listed under each of those major headings are the resources that we have available to support that area. There will be a link for a quick access and then a brief description of the purpose of that particular tool. So again, the general implementation guide is really all about that systems level work to support standards implementation.
Hey, and good afternoon, everyone. So when we shift now to the content implementation guides, and again, a lot of similarity drawing from the general implementation guide, here just resources to support. So building background knowledge of the content area standards, furthering that wherever teachers might happen to be, alignment of instructional resources, assessment, and tasks to make sure everything is squared with the CAS, and then effective classroom instruction. Lots of things to think about and resources to support doing this effectively within the content areas. So here again, this is the document for mathematics. All four for reading and writing, for social studies, for science, and for mathematics, all four are structurally and stylistically similar with some subtle differences. The core content and the supports and resources in each are more or less similar, but then there are some disciplinary differences to support standards implementation in the four content areas. Okay, so accessing again from kystandards.org, if you click the yellow Your Standards Resources tab, and you can see the arrow in the upper right, the click that took us here, you'll see the icon for standards implementation guidance documents, and if you click there, you will land here. So at the top, you see our general standards implementation guide, and then the four content implementation guides for reading and writing, math, social studies, and science. Okay, so we're going to have some time to independently explore. So I think we're going to have about 8 minutes here. And as you're choosing where to start, and as you're navigating from there, and also as you're holding, thinking, jotting down whatever stands out, wherever you're holding that. So think about which resources could best support next phases of standards implementation. Again, acknowledging that we're all in different places, even within the same district, thinking about just what really supports what might be next wherever you are with standards implementation, and then what might these resources reveal about instructional needs at the local level. So as you're seeing things, is that triggering a recognition that, oh, we don't quite have that yet, including needs for professional learning. So we're going to have about 8 minutes now just to independently explore, and you can use those two considerations to help figure out where to start and where to go from there, and maybe what thinking to make note of that we can carry over into our breakout rooms that follow.
And again, we put that link in the chat. So when you click on that link, it'll take you straight to that page that he showed, and you can choose the implementation guide that you would want to further explore.
And while you all are exploring, I'm going to work on technology and see if the breakout rooms will let us break out a little better this time.
I'll let you all know when you have about a minute left. Okay, so if you can bring what you're looking at or thinking about to a close. In our breakout rooms, so we'll have a little bit of latitude, but consider these two things. Which resources could best support next phases of standard implementation? So thinking about what resources could support where you need to go next, and then what might these resources reveal about instructional needs at your local level? So again, seeing things, did it trigger any sense that, oh yeah, we need to do something with this or that, including needs for professional learning. So we're going to have about 5 minutes here in breakout rooms to share out a little bit and see what other folks are thinking as well. I think once everybody's back, we're ready to transition. I
believe we are. Thank you all for your patience with this, and I do apologize that there are some people experiencing trouble with the breakout rooms. I don't know what else to do except what I have already tried, but our main purpose was we wanted to give you all an opportunity to look at the resources briefly and then discuss with your peers. So I apologize that you didn't get that opportunity, but we're working on it. So we are going to transition. Or first of all, let me make sure I provide you with their contact information. I know some of you had already put some questions in the chat, and I do want to pause here in case anyone does have any specific questions for Fox or Misty before we transition to the next portion. All right, well, I think we are ready to go. And again, I will post all the contact information again at the end. These are some things we hope that you'll continue to think about. And the main thing we wanted to provide was the resources so you can think about how they can support your work. Again, this is a lot of information in a brief amount of time, but also just wanted to show you what is available. And, you know, as you're assessing your needs for the upcoming year and you're thinking about, you know, the funding and whatnot, these are also some options to design your professional learning plans around. So we are going to next hear from some fellow professional development coordinators. We have Tara Isaacs from Jefferson County. We have Stacy Imel from Knox County, and we have Josh Blevins from Casey County. And here are the guiding questions for the last part of our afternoon, and what they're going to talk about a little bit, and also in connection with what they currently do at their district, and that is ways to approach planning for the district, who should be included and who can be included in the decision making, how you can measure whether what is being done in the district is working, and then just a few, we called it tips and tricks earlier when we were planning, organizational strategies that they have utilized that have helped them with their overall coordination. So I am going to, I think, let Josh get started, and I will be.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Just want to say thank you to all of our session survivors that are with us. It's never easy to be the gatekeeper, but I do promise I'll be brief. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us. But I am Josh Blevins. I'm the Director of District-Wide Programs with Casey County Schools. Throughout my career, I've seen all the levels of implementation of professional development planning, from being a teacher at the middle school to high school principal, to now serving at central office. So my team for this portion of the day, as Chris said, is Tara Isaacs with Jefferson County and Stacy Imel with Knox County. And when we were all planning our portion for this, we all collectively spoke and wanted to reiterate that collaboration and participation in learning opportunities were direct impacts to where we are today as each respective district. And I'll let Stacy and Tara speak for their district, but for Casey County, we've had an intentional focus on professional learning. Nearly all of our current administrators have attended NISL through KDE. Our principals, myself included, have been part of P3. We've partnered in other venues such as the Next Generation Leadership with UK, KSA, training our district staff in the leadership challenge, plus many others, visible learning with John Hattie, and the list goes on. Some of our learning was not directly targeted towards professional learning practice, but just like my first slide states, it's about the process. So I wanted to share the approach that's currently happening in Case County, and I'll keep it simple for sure, but it all starts with communication. All of the school and district PD plans are created and shared through a PD drive on Google, and the intention was to create a one-stop shop, in a sense, for each calendar year for our principals and district and school leaders. The initial approach was to create intentionality, create connections to the multiple pieces that we all juggle, that sometimes, seems to exist in isolation. Our needs assessment, CSIPs, even our school level PLC agendas, hoping to maybe consolidate all of this through a school plan. So through Google, we could link any of those pieces, and making the transition from compliance, essentially, for receiving 24 hours of PD credit to a live systematic approach to development of skill, and understanding that our staff will hopefully deploy in the classroom and hopefully impact student learning in a positive way. There's always been a divide, though, with our principal impact surveys and where our teacher state PD opportunities are limited, and we'd hope to show relevant applications and opportunities for everyone. Personally, I think approaching any deployment, you can break it into 4 steps, and that's listed here on my slide. Know your audience, know your goals or outcomes, and keep the focus on what's important. And then ultimately, you have to monitor and evaluate. So in Casey County, I had a sample plan from our middle school, and Chris, if you want to click that, or you can open that. Here's what the plan looks like, and each plan does differ depending on needs. As we continue to develop and improve, we'll start linking our CSIP goals for direct correlations that we can list there. One caveat is, though, that some years our districts may have specific training that will dominate the majority of our PD hours, such as this coming year, our partnership with KYCL, the focus is on literacy, but we give our schools as much time as they request. So, but each year about this time, we start discussing as a district leadership team. We include the superintendent and director of special education, and all of our directors. We want to talk about each initiative that we want to be included at each school, any update training, curriculum shifts, or whatever the case may be. And we would take those discussion elements to our building level admin team with a few additional items for consideration. And then each school begins the process. You can follow along with the plan there. They outline the number of hours they want to spend on each of these topics, who's on point, who's going to facilitate, who's going to be included, who's going to attend. Ultimately, we have to tie that to one of our needs. So that's going to fall under our CSIP connections. And then we're going to describe that first professional learning opportunity. The biggest impact, I think, there is you'll see that under the measure of effectiveness and monitoring, you'll see PLCs falls there. I think that's kind of a broad overcast of everything. And my suggestion is maybe start linking those PLC agendas within this document so you can actually see the effectiveness as it builds. So I'd also recommend, as I do with our building leaders, get teacher insight, ask questions, give surveys. They know what they need, and if we're creative, we can find an outlet. But in times past, we have created conference-like venues where different sessions are led by teachers around our district on given topics. We tried tapping leadership on the shoulder and giving these teachers that show greatness in an area an opportunity to lead. Teachers could sign up for sessions based on interests. Grade level bands, content areas are also an excellent way to network within the district. But I'll kind of close with this last slide here. Ultimately, try to find a way to publish all the opportunities through the schools. Conflicts are inevitable. So we tried to create a chronological calendar so that if a teacher was unable to attend at one school, they may find a correlating session within another school, and then they just work that out with their principals. I would suggest the use of sign-in sheets, because ultimately there's always someone that gets left off the sign-in sheet to verify attendance. So organization through this process is vital. Having someone there able to, say that they've attended. But those common stumbling blocks such as that, you're going to have late hires. A lot of our training happens at the beginning of the year, so it's finding other avenues later so that new staff can also be trained. But the ticket there is just to stay organized, have checkpoints in place, get principal input, sign-in sheets and certificates if needed. And the last point is 24 hours of PD is a minimum. It is not the maximum. It should be embedded in all school processes and attempts made to show connectivity at all school initiatives. That's only going to add validity to your planning process. So that's just kind of a peek at what we're doing at Casey County. I hope you maybe could steal some ideas from that. But at this time, I'll go ahead and shift to Ms. Tara Isaacs.
Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. Just quickly wanted to say a big thanks to Chris for inviting some different perspectives into the call, and also to Josh and Stacy. When we were planning our presentation, we tried to all hit on different things, and that is why you're going to hear something different from each of us. From the Jefferson County perspective, I wanted to just start off with some context that about 6.5 years ago, we were looking at a state takeover. There were 3 different reorganizations all within just a very short amount of time. And so we jumped on board quickly with an opportunity, and Josh alluded to this earlier with some of the things KD offers, but there was an Innovation Learning Network grant, travel grant. And at that time, we were looking at how we could shift practice in our district to really improve student learning. At the time, the culture was looking at professional learning as just counting up credits. We kind of joked, bean counting is what it was called. And so we're really looking at shifting our culture so that we could actually see results. And the theory of action that we talked to Dr. Polio about was if we could focus on shifting adult practice and really invest in that portion of the work, could we see changes or better improvements or faster improvements in student learning if we spent some time investing that area instead of just jumping on student data or just without a system in place. That led to his investment in 3 of us to go into the Learning Forward Academy, and that was going on simultaneously with the travel grant. And you can see just a little picture here. We traveled to different districts that were tied into the Learning Forward organization. As many of you know, that's the national professional learning organization that everything they do to lobby for impacts our work across school districts. And so we traveled to New York, Georgia, to a couple places. There were a couple places in Florida, and we were in contact with another organization in Colorado. But in all of those places, we were looking at high-performing districts that had a really strong handle on how their systems look for professional learning. And then the bottom slide, the very last one, this was an investment our superintendent invested in. It was a 2.5-year commitment for 3 of us, kind of all 3 of us coming from different departments, so that we would each go through this academy focusing on professional learning problems of practice, and then looking at a theory of action, an implementation plan, and then evaluation of impact. These are things that we do, I think, innately in our world, but this one was taking us through a more formalized system so that we could see if what we were doing was really translating to actions. Everything at the top right is a link. You can see more specific information and live links if you wanted to investigate that. And then also, I've got a link for the Learning Forward Academy and then also the grant. This is just a little background. You can go to the next slide. When we invested in sending people to the Learning Forward Academy, and then we also took advantage of the Innovation Learning Grant with the KDE, we came across some documents and some ahas. Josh alluded to some of those, that professional learning needs to be seen as a process, not a one and done. It is something that we want to provide feedback, continual coaching, and people having time to apply that learning. The document at the top, which you really can't see, it outlines the 7 standards that we currently have, which that's going to move to 11. But it lets you see that if you know what your people are learning and you know how they perceive their learners, they perceive their learning and their strengths or areas to grow in, you can see that without those standards and those intentional focus in those areas, you can see that you have pockets of excellence, or you have resistance, or you have an unsustained practice, but it lets you see how important paying attention to those standards are. On the right, this was just more of, we took a deeper dive in learning what those standards meant. A lot of us had different understanding of what learning designs meant, and what resources, and then how it connected to learning. And then the bottom, I have some links, some actual live links to that. These are some actual things that we learned about, and then we turned them into products. And if I'm starting at the top, left, that is a framework that we looked at, I believe, in 2 Georgia school districts. I think it was Fulton County that we adapted it from. But we took the professional learning standards and what we saw for best practices, and we turned it into our own framework for if someone was doing professional learning, how could we provide them feedback on where they were and what might be needed. The middle, the PD models, we were looking at how to explain to someone what a high quality model for professional learning was like. And that also has a little bit of the framework towards the bottom. And the link to this, you'll be able to see those a little bit more up close. The top right was trying to explain to our superintendent and the instructional cabinet exactly what we were aiming to do with our theory of action. And we were looking at, if we're working on culture, we're working on student achievement, then we have a better chance of teacher retention if we are going after these things together in a systemic way. The KASAB, this is what I call the Willy Wonka golden nugget. A lot of people have great ideas, and as you know, in your own districts, we have such talented people with lofty goals, and we have great ideas, but we don't spend enough time looking at the implementation. And I joke, for those of you who are into fitness or health, that we don't lose 20 pounds with reading an article about water intake. You have to set up specific goals with initial and intermediate outcomes for measuring that work. And that's usually where school PD plans come into play, with kind of missing that mark. And then the last bottom left, that is sort of like a rubric. They're called innovation configuration maps. And a lot of people know what they need to do to improve, but they don't know necessarily the language or that they need to use to write an outcome if they want to improve professional growth, a school PD plan, a CSIP plan, or just looking at moving a PLC forward. You can move to the next slide, please. This one is a little recap on the previous slide, but it's basically showing you that we took some immediate action. The purple and the blue videos under actions taken, we just decided to start educating our professional development contacts. We had about 400, close to 500 PD contacts in the district that represented departments, schools, some were secretaries, some were certified teachers. So we started teaching them about the redesign of our system, and then what high quality models would look like, and then explaining to them what best practices and learning were if they were really committed to shifting practice of adults. There's the framework that we landed on, and since then has been adapted from our department with dealing with students with disabilities. They have actually framed that to be even more centered on some of the things they look for in high quality proposals, a repeat of the models. And then we also saw a direct correlation with the professional learning with how we were onboarding and providing support for new teachers. So I've got some other links that I'm sharing with you in these, not really going to talk about it, but I wanted you to know of the correlation. While we were growing in our Learning Forward Academy work and our visits, we saw there was a lot of work put into the development of teachers, and at the same time developing seasoned teachers to support those new teachers. So we were coming at it from both ends. So the meat of our work, oh, I'm not quite ready yet. I'm sorry about that. The bottom last, kind of where you see the red slide, the school PD plans. So when I first came into the district, looking in this particular role, I was noticing that we scheduled the PD planning, but we weren't really looking or providing feedback on it. So this is the first iteration where I had things divided up by zones, where you could look at a school from a 2-year cycle from where they perceived professional learning needs, how they went about their system for their needs assessment, how they evaluated for impact. And we learned a ton about our schools and how people were approaching that. And that's going to lead to the next slide in just a minute. But before you move on, we also investigated something called a standards assessment inventory. And one of the questions Chris posed to us was, how was it that you evaluated for impact or know what your needs were? And we'd say needs assessment, we did a survey of this, survey of that. The great thing about this survey, which I'll talk about in a second, is that this was all correlated or congruent to the actual professional learning standards. You can go to the next slide. So the bottom is kind of the iteration of kind of where we started with. Someone needs to be looking at these school PD plans to look and see how we can support. We can look to see who is doing this well, who needs added workshop time. And then we noticed that there were some missed opportunities in there. The third slide at the very bottom is kind of like when I was sharing out with the district about, we were planning with activities, kind of like the weight loss or muscle mass building. We were talking about one and dones, like an article on drinking water or an article on how to lift weights, but not really putting an implementation plan in. The last iteration with looking at school PD plans, and you see the little yellow pieces, we were looking at trying to put the attention on those intermediate outcomes to really get people to look at, are we focusing on changing knowledge, skills, an attitude, a behavior, or is it an aspiration? Being really intentional. A lot of times PD is just focused on sharing knowledge, just sit and get. But if we're committed to those high quality models, we're looking at PD sustained over time, and we can get to some specific things if we're really taking time to look at what we're trying to change. There are 3 links off to the side, which I'm not going to have Chris click on that. It'll be available to you. But basically, it was my department teaming up with our data management and research department. And we were looking at taking the eProof system and figuring out a way of how we can take how my department was asking for the PD plan prior to the end of the school year, and looking at when the Department of Education here in Kentucky we were looking at how can we merge the timeline so that people can use it and effectively and not kind of in isolation. So the 3 circles just kind of let you see kind of our breakdown of how we envision this, and then also kind of our rationale for why we wanted to shift it instead of 2 separate events, making them all part of the system that KDE had designed for us to be. So I've included a couple links there. Amy Stokes, hyphenated Levine, Levine, she's my contact and gets the credit for this beautiful depiction of our work here, but I wanted to make sure to point that out. Mine is sort of the bottom work, and then we are, and it's part of the work Josh talked about. We can't collaborate enough with the people that we work with across Kentucky in districts and even within our own district to really move student achievement forward and get better ourselves. The next slide, please. On this slide, when looking at evaluation of impact, I just wanted to draw attention to, I'd mentioned a little bit about what's called a standards assessment inventory. It's usually about $100 to $200 maybe a school, but it is something you can have if you're a member of the Learning Forward organization, and it's a way for you to look at the way that teachers perceive their learning. I also linked in there some information about our district comprehensive school survey so that you could see the kind of questions that we ask. I had a lot of challenge in trying to administer a needs assessment when all these changes were happening in our district. And so the next best way for me to do it and satisfy my role was I worked with another department to add 5 critical professional learning questions in so that we could get survey data without inundating them with all these extra requests for surveys. I mentioned high quality models, a framework, and some best practice items. I've linked those there. You've seen kind of a snapshot in previous slides, but I wanted to just point out that that will be available when you have access to this presentation. And then last but not least, sometimes you've heard that old adage of, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. Tom Guskey is from Lexington, Kentucky. He's worked at University of Kentucky and University of Louisville, a brilliant scholar and academic. But we are also looking at, when we evaluate our professional learning, going past those feelings or emotions of the level 1 and 2 and getting more into the student outcome, the systems change, and how that application of learning shifted in the adult. So that's the level 3, 4, and 5. And we're looking at awarding PD on a higher level, more than just sit and get, like additional PD hours if we can see those products. I had a little just a kind of like visual for you off to the side that shows you examples of some of the reports you can get from the standards assessment inventory, and then also Guskey's levels, just to kind of give you a visual on what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. These are just kind of a hodgepodge of some things that we have done to try to liven up professional learning, give people some context, a way to organize materials. The very top, if you were to go to the JCPS, if you just Googled JCPS professional learning, at the very bottom of our page in JCPS, there's a link to what's called the learning link. It is open for public. People wouldn't know to go to it unless they went to that page. But this picture where you see kind of my team below, this is at the top. There are different categories as far as best practice for professional learning, our new teacher programming, what we have for certified, for classified, and just kind of general information, frequently asked questions. It may give you some ideas, and you may have some ideas for us on how to improve, but I wanted to share that. It is linked in one of the slides that I've left that's live. The new teacher 21-22, it's a badge we were trying to give away we had a large number of new hires in our district, so we were trying to ask new teachers, place this in your signature over the pandemic so that if an office got an email from you, there would be a lot more grace or patience, or trying to help people if they recognize this is a person that is newly planted in our learning culture. This contact professional development and learning, this is a badge we have given to people that, again, I said we have close to 500 PD contacts that people have identified themselves as a connection to their building. We have that in the signature line, and that's a quick reference that these are one of our people, and we can kind of get to a quicker connection when we're trying to troubleshoot something that they're working on. Below is just an example of we got creative during the pandemic, and we've developed our IT department developed a digital learning channel, and we have kind of taken on some of that now with how we deliver some of our PD days for Flex PD days. The top right, this was another suggestion. If you have a large number of people you're emailing, we've gotten very acclimated with what's called Formule inside Google. Some of you are probably nodding like, oh yes, we know Formule. And it's just a great way for a lot of information to be shared by one tool carrying the load. And so we're able to keep up with who's done what. And I'm just sharing, if you want more information, I'll be glad to share. And then the bottom innovation was, instead of just doing PD as we've always done it, we looked at how could we offer PD for people that are doing problems of practice and working on that iteration throughout the whole year of improving something. So we've started trying to get creative with how to award PD credit. You can go to the next slide. Our tips and tricks. We have videos. The 3 pillars at the bottom, we kind of divided and conquered among the group that went to Learning Forward. One focused on coaching, one focused on new teachers, and one person focused on the district system. The one that's got vector solutions, that's just some changes for us. We are moving to a new PD platform to manage. We're trying to be a part of starting our Learning Forward affiliate, state affiliate, bringing that back to fruition. And there's just a couple other things there, just kind of as a reminder if you have additional questions. And I believe Josh touched on this, but you can't communicate enough. Offering workshop time for your principals or new PD contacts or people that you're working with. You know, there's a lot of information we eat, live, and breathe, and it helps when we offer that safety net of giving people time to mess up or ask those questions they might be embarrassed. Sharing examples, coaching, piloting in small areas, go slow to go fast. Can't say enough about the Learning Forward organization. I also can't say enough about the people at KDE who have helped me troubleshoot some things that I just wasn't sure how to move forward with or needed help interpreting something in regulation. And then your PD contacts, networking across the state. And I keep hearing this when I talk to outside vendors, is how important it is that we connect our academic theory to actual practitioner practice, how important it is us in these roles to be able to look at both. And then I also threw in understanding the framework just as another visual for you. And I think that might be it for me. And I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for having me today. Chris, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And I just want to say I'm just like you guys. I've learned a lot from being in this process with talking with and planning with Tara and Josh. You know, I've certainly learned some things that I'm going to take back with me after today and implement in our district because it is a continual process. I have been in this role. This is my 9th year at central office. Of course, I was previously, I've been a teacher, a guidance counselor, a principal at our CTC, and worked in our alternative program. So I've got different backgrounds from all different areas in education. And so while I was a principal, one of the frustrations that we kind of had going on in our district at the time is that unfortunately professional learning was just hours. You know, just getting those required 24 hours in. It wasn't so much meaningful, or it wasn't something that was consistent to grow teachers and therefore impact student learning. And then the other big issue that I saw, and a frustration that I had as a building level administrator, was that our district really controlled a lot of our professional learning that was happening in the schools. So my goals was to, of course, make the professional learning that was offered, you know, intentional, and to help grow our teachers to impact student learning, and then to give more autonomy to our schools, because I knew as a principal what our teachers needed. I felt like what was needed to grow our teachers, and so we built a system to try to do that. And of course, planning professional learning at the district level, we do have lots of communications with our stakeholder. We really value our stakeholder involvement. We talk with our teachers, we talk with our principals. We do needs assessment. We look at needs assessments, and we do lots of walkthroughs, and we look at our walkthrough data, and we have lots of conversations one-on-one with our principals during quarterly reports. And we look at CSIPs, and we try to figure out, you know, how as the district we can best support what each individual school is, and we also look for commonalities across the board. So with that being said, we really want to make sure that our professional learning is meeting a goal in the CSIP, a CDIP, or a PGP. That we move away from that just getting hours to making sure that that our professional learning is meaningful. So just looking there at so we measure our professional learning in a variety of ways. We look at student assessment results and our surveys such as Impact Kentucky. One thing that I'm proud of is in our Impact Kentucky, that's one of the things that our teachers really comment on in the past few years, is how appreciative they are of the changes that have been made in the professional learning and making it more intentional. And one other thing that we do is that we have done in the past few years is that we have tried to just build our professional learning on certain initiatives. Like our teachers were frustrated with one initiative this year and one initiative next year, something different. And so over the past few years, we have really seen a need in our district for student engagement. And so we have really spent a lot of money and a lot of time in implementing Kagan in our district. That's been a big push for us, and we've used Kagan strategies for the last 4 or 5 years, and it continues to be a need. We're in quarterly reports right now. This morning, I talked to 2 principals, and that's a piece that we talk about. And of course, they still we do different aspects of the Kagan, and so student engagement is still a push for our district as far as our professional learning needs. And so we have continued to support our schools with that. So I'll talk more about how we do the organization part of our professional learning in my slides. Of course, we utilize the Google Workplace to receive PD requests and grant approvals and manage the offerings on a PD calendar and collect reflections afterwards. If you want to go to the next slide. So our principals propose a session, and so the request for the PD they're submitted through a Google form, and they have to link what they are proposing to have at their school to a professional growth goal or a need that's at their school in their CSIP, or individual teachers may use their PGP. The next slide. So once those proposals are made and we see that there is a tie to a goal, then we announce the professional learning on our Google Calendar. So teachers can go in, and there's a link that they can register for, and so that from there we generate our sign-in sheets. We know how many to plan for, and so that's kind of an organizational piece of that. The next slide, please. So after the professional learning has taken place, of course, we gather the sign-in sheet, and each teacher is then emailed out a reflection for them to give the input. And in the reflection, they of course can say how that it will impact the learning in their classroom. And then from there, once they submit it, we use Autocrat to generate a PD certificate, and it's emailed to them, and it's also put in their Google Drive, so they have access to those kinds of things that they'll need toward the end of the year. Then the next slide. One thing that we do have at every school, which is kind of a tip or trick that I was going to talk about, is that I have a PD liaison at every school, and that's kind of my contact with each of the schools. And you know, they work with the teachers directly there at the school level, and then they also communicate with me as far as different needs that may arise throughout the school year. We do file our PD certificates in a binder, and then we go over those with the PD liaison at the end of the school year, just to check and make sure that all areas have been met and addressed, CSIP goals, PGB goals, things like that. One other thing that we do as far as a tip or a trick, that our calendar kind of dictated this one year, and then it was so well received by our principals and the teachers, we just made sure that it always happened from then on out. Was we did front load our PD as much as we could at the beginning of the school year. In the past, we had PD days as late as April or March or April, and the principals, you know, said we really couldn't implement the new learning or measure, the success of it at far out in the school year. So we now, all of our professional learning is complete by Thanksgiving. And that has been one really good thing that happened kind of by accident, but we've put it in place for several years now, because we can have the whole year to see the impact of that learning. And then the other thing is the consistency. We were kind of one of those districts, like I said previously, that may have an initiative this year and an initiative next year, and that frustrated our teachers. So we've had this constant initiative for student engagement, and we've just tried to build on that every year. And so that seems to have always have helped as well. And I will reiterate what my colleagues Tara and Josh said about we've tried to really focus on getting teachers away from just trying to get those hours, and that professional learning is ongoing. And even though there is that 24-hour limit, we really want to reiterate that growing our teachers is really, really important, and the impact of growing teachers ultimately benefits our students. So that's what we try to convey as far as professional learning in Knox County. And that's pretty much everything I have. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this group.
Well, thank you all certainly for providing this information and sharing your tips and tricks with everybody else. I am going to stop here to see if there are any questions for Stacy, Tara, or Josh. I'm going to provide their contact information as well, so you can have it. But while we have them on here, if there were any questions in the chat that you all have for them. So Stacy, there was a question on who serves as the PD liaisons at the school.
Most of the time it's a curriculum coach, but sometimes it's an assistant principal. There's a couple schools where the assistant principal is, and mostly the curriculum coaches take on that role.
And then can you see those in the chat? Crystal has a question. Do the liaisons receive a stipend for that work?
I saw that pop up, that question, and they do not as of now. It's been something that I have thought about possibly floating out as far as a stipend to our superintendent. So they don't, it's work that they really do during the school day. Like I said, they're curriculum coaches, so they have some of that time, but a stipend would be nice. It's not something that I've not thought of before, and so hopefully in the future, maybe that could be a possibility. I am the federal programs director too, so maybe I could find some money.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for our PDCs? So again, just some things to reflect on from this last portion of our forum today. A lot of questions have come through on the availability of the PowerPoint and things. My plan is to have all of that attached to our monthly communication that you get through email. Hopefully also post it on the website. To have the video ready, that's going to take a couple days because it has to go through a workflow before I can post it, but I assure you I will make sure you get these resources. So here is the contact information for our PDCs. Tara has also included 2 other people from her office. So if you, want to contact them as well. And it's time for that feedback that everybody always likes to provide. But because the overall theme today has been intentionality, this helps us be intentional in how we support you. So it's very brief. There is also, if you do need ELA credit for today, this is how we'll track that. So you can either scan the little code, or I think I can put this in the chat. Let's see what happens. And hopefully you can just fill that out for us, and we will very much welcome your feedback on that. I want to thank everybody that hung with us this afternoon despite technology problems and other things. I know you all are extremely busy, and this is a long time to sit and get, as we've talked about not being maybe the optimal platform for learning, but I think it has enabled us to not have to travel and things, but yet have access to some valuable information. I really want to also thank the presenters that have partnered with me and others in the office to hopefully provide you all with some information that can help. So for my PDCs, we will also meet in July to talk about policy and regulations for PD and things. So I'll look forward to chatting with you all again then. So here is the last slide with all of the contact information from everyone that has either spoken today or has been referenced. And I will, unless anyone else has any other questions or anything else they'd like to add, we will call it a day with 30 minutes to spare. And again, thanks everyone for your participation and for your help.